I was in high spirits, despite the aches in my body. As I packed the last of my personal effects, I couldn't help but smile sadly. This room had served as my home for the last 5 years, save for the occasion in the first 2 where I went home for the holidays. 5 years. It had passed so quickly now that it was over, and I was only starting to realize how much had happened, how much I had changed in all those years. After my success in the Undercity, as haphazard and luck-based as it was, I had met with the regent of the home city, as the divine leaders of the Dragawa were away attending to godly affairs at the time, or so I was told. It had only been on the long ride up the lift that I realized something was wrong. When my brothers and I had entered the Undercity, there had been no less than 3 months until the date of my birth. However, when I arrived, the regent informed me that temporal displacements are not unknown to the Undercity, and I had been fortunate to make it out, no matter the means or circumstances. Losing a few months was a cheap cost for such glory, even if it went unspoken. I was assured several times. However, my brothers had left after waiting for nearly a month for me, and were no doubt back and preparing to go to Trannis, as they had both received a scholarship for their own successes within the Undercity. The regent informed me I too would be receiving a similar scholarship. However, I would also be receiving additional courses of a personalized nature. I was assured that these would only be part of my reward for my grand success in the Undercity. However, my only concern was getting home, and for that, the regent was able to summon one of the court archmages to send me home with their magics. The reunion when I arrived was both joyous, loud, and raucous, and lasted for 3 days. My brothers taking great joy in filling me in on everything that had passed in the time that I had been separated from them. We then spent the last few months before leaving for Trannis helping Chanla, Sogman, and Miska get everything settled for maintaining the farm while we were gone. The praetor that had slain the Knight of Rotwood, Nov Dabez, had made a habit of visiting regularly as he roamed the plains of the lawless lands of Solaris, lending aid as needed, and his regular visits helped greatly in keeping the Celestians informed and ready for any threats or other events of note. By the time we had left for Trannis on our transport ship, we had left things with the farm better off than I ever thought we could have actually achieved. Chanlos piloted the ship, as he would be stopping on the way back after dropping us off to deliver a selection of crops and other goods to various dealers in Domnitra. The output of our fields and the fact that we had been able to plant, maintain, and harvest such large quantities and expansive quantities of various foodstuffs in the first place allowed us to sell in bulk to multiple parties. The funds and profits from these sales had been planned out as to the projects and aims for our home. By all our guesses and estimates, by the time we graduated, we would be having the infrastructure and other necessities built for the eventual expansion of our lands and the services we planned to offer our local region. However, I had not gone home in 3 years, and I was exactly unsure of how far along everything was. The brothers themselves rarely spoke of those things when they returned from holidays, mostly passing on stories and well wishes from the Celestians, and tales of adventures or exciting tidbits from the year. In fact, I think that might be why they were so anxious to get home before I did. They'd finished with their final exams and such and graduated a full week before me, and almost immediately made for home on the first airship heading south. They said they wanted to ensure that everything was perfect for my arrival. The sound of metal on stone from just outside my room's door snapped me from my thoughts as I turned and saw the tall form of Professor Kanar, a living statue of an NLR, and one of my most harsh but fair instructors. It was he who had arranged and oversaw the Combined Force Personal Combat exam my brothers and I had completed a week ago. It had been the last test for Justique and Lawson, after which they were full 5-year grads of Tranus. I, however, had other tests to take, and although none of them compared to the fight this pile of over-enchanted metal had arranged. He looked at me with an expression that I wasn't familiar with, and then he spoke, not with the harsh tones of an instructor like I was used to, but with warmth and respect. "You're moving well for the beating you took." "Thanks. Any chance I can finally get an answer to the question about who in the realms you threw at us? We may have made him bleed, and granted you said that was all that we needed to do. But I am not a fool, and there is no way after all that you and the other instructors have taught me that I actually believe I got that kick into his jaw honestly. Whoever he was too fast and way too skilled for such a petulant and spiteful kick to actually have landed. So, now that I'm leaving, who is he? And why did he let me kick him?" Professor Kanar looked at me rather seriously. "Well, damn. Your brothers are under the impression that you surprised him and got that kick in fair. But you are saying that he let you get it in. And you are right, of course." I forced my face to go to a cold, neutral expression as I focused to contain the anger and rage those words conjured. "As to who he is, and why he might let you get that strike in, I can tell you this. He is an old instructor whose expertise has been called away to other tasks for many, many years. And the fact he was available to serve as your evaluator was a thing of serendipity. Why he let you hit him is easy. You earned it. There may not be a more prideful man that has ever been an instructor, but I guarantee from the onset of the exam, he had already determined exactly how hard he would fight. As again, you are spot on, he's far more capable than he showed, but this was not his test. It was yours and your brother's. You won. And in battle, that is all that matters." I took a long moment, both to calm myself and process the greater implications of both the answer and the presence of one of the most aloof professors themselves. "Alright. All that being said, Professor, are you here to make sure I'm actually leaving?" "Despite your enhanced curriculum, you have had plenty of time to go home in the past 3 years. Instead, you have stayed and took even more classes. Such drive should be commended. And tempered." His gaze felt oddly lighter than when he was teaching, but it did feel as he was trying to impress one final lesson upon me. "But that is not why I am here. You, Lord Katheon, have received a request for a meeting. One I would advise you to decline." "Who? And why?" The professor was not known for giving out advice, at least not of a class or war-based favor. "The who is Domnitra, and the why is very simple." He gestured to my bracer. "They have always been very focused on obtaining or recovering any items of ancient auratic providence. While I do not believe that they would be so bold as to actually try to take it from you, I believe it would be better for all, and you especially, if they never had the chance to see you with it. That is all. I took a moment to mull this over. The point was solid. Are you aware of what they want with me? If I had to guess, I would propose looking to fortify relations with one of the largest and strongest independent strongpoints in the northern parts of the plains. I couldn't help but smile. While I was not aware of the details, I knew that the Celestians would have been nothing if not busy and diligent to the plans and goals we had set. Either way, you should make them come to you, Katheon, both to be on better ground for negotiations and better ground for any shenanigans that may occur. Well, it's gonna cost to book passage on transport that doesn't stop at Domnitra on the way. Professor Kennard just smiled as if I had told a joke. That would be the other reason for my arrival. When you have finished, packed, and are ready, please make your way to Air Dock 36. I am informed you will find the final part of your Undercity spoils there. I took a sharp breath. I had forgotten that there was anything outstanding on that account. Anyways, Katheon, it has been an honor to be your instructor. By the 9 and 4, may you find nothing but victory, Katheon Leanth. With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing in a soft pop. I made my way to the air dock with some speed, as I was now eager to see what awaited for me there. I was not disappointed, as a smaller yet roomy transport sat moored at the dock. Made of metal, possibly meteor iron. It was a personal transport, and looked almost brand new. The dockmaster came over and handed me a small box that held the keys and instructions for the craft. Looks to be a fine craft, freshly built and delivered not a week ago, was all he said before moving on to deal with another matter. Boarding the transport and opening the box, I followed the included instructions to power up the craft and maneuver it out of the dock, before setting a course and allowing the onboard systems to take control of the craft and begin the flight home. I stepped from the control room into the passenger compartment, setting my bags, spear, and blade aside as I walked around the cabin and examined my new craft. Comfortable, roomy, and with a bar. After a bit, I poured myself a drink and sat down to read the letter and other materials included with the keys. The letter read as follows. Dear Lord Katheon Leanth, let it be known by decree and instruction of the divine rulers of the home city that by your acts of strength, bravery, and your survival instincts, you have obtained a feat that few among the wise or ageless have, and have proven yourself deserving of recognition and reward. Your education has been but one of these rewards. With that now complete, it has been decided by the divine blade and chain that you should have a vessel worthy of your potential, with which to find and explore your fate and destiny. Therefore, this vessel was commissioned for you, and to standards dictated by the divine lords of the home city themselves. May it bear you safely to the bright future that you are most assuredly headed to. Sincerely, Regent Thronewatch of the home city. The small tome included was an extensive manual for repair, maintenance, as well as potential customizations. The book itself was magical, having many more pages than it would have appeared from the outside, and it took me quite a while to skim through it. Having emptied my glass, I stood to refill it. Walking to the bar and pouring myself a fresh drink, I set the glass down and slowed as I felt and heard a faint pop from behind me. I spun on my heel more on instinct than anything, and had drawn my pistol almost clear of its holster by the time I had spotted someone in a chair in the corner of my sight. 5 years of reflexes did the rest, and I snapped off a pair of shots at the intruder. Trails of smoke rose behind the head of the man sitting in the chair, dressed in a plain white suit, and he just smiled as he addressed me. "Good reflexes. I guess we shouldn't expect anything less of a 5th-year grad." He stopped as he noticed that I hadn't lowered my gun. He reached into his jacket, and I fired again before he could draw his own weapon. But he didn't draw a weapon. He simply placed his hand in the way of the blast, and I watched it strike and detonate and leave no mark upon his hand. "Perhaps that was a bit foolish of me, but as you can see, your blasts aren't going to help." He taunted as I flipped the switch on my sidearm and fired again. This time, a ballistic round that came out and struck his outstretched hand, and whatever protection he had against energy blasts did not apparently carry over to a solid slug, and his hand exploded in a squall of blood and viscera. To the man's credit, he only grimaced and watched at the destruction of his hand, and then he winked. At that, everything, and I mean everything, froze. The smoke on the end of my weapon, the reddish-pink mist that was this man's hand, everything except the man himself, who stood and took a few steps towards me. His hand regrew itself in 2 steps. I began to wonder just how my body would be discovered. Would my brothers ever know? However, the man did not attack me. Instead, he walked past me and poured himself a drink, picked up my glass, and took our glasses over to the chairs, setting them down. And then he looked at me purposefully. And that is what we call hubris, and a painful reminder of it as well. He softly chuckled before waving his regenerated hand, and all the smoke, gore, and other signs of violence were all gone. "Now, please sit, Lord Katheon. We have things to discuss." I found I could move again, and stowed my weapon and sat down, angry. "You invade my privacy, make a mockery of me, and then expect to treat with me?" The man looked at me with a passive face as he formed his response. "You chose to refuse my invitation, even though it would not have been more than an hour or 2 added to your trip. I even timed it for when you were going home for your convenience." I took a moment to consider this. If I cannot decline, is it an invitation or a summons? He smiled warmly. Good point. Perhaps I should have been more blunt in my missive. However, I am here, and we can get on with discussing how Domnitra and your quickly forming community can work together for the benefit of all. I lifted my glass and took a slow pull. Everything was going to plan, it seemed. I set down my glass, fixed him with a fair, even stare, and asked, "Your name and position, good sir. I will not treat with someone who I do not know." He smiled even wider. "Lord Reesden, advisor to the Emperor of the Flameford, region of Domnitra. But please, call me Ari." By the 9 and 4, welcome back to the library, where today we're going to take a brief look at one of the major powers of the realms, that of the flame-forged nation of Domnitra. As is routine by this point, my perceptive patrons, this will be but an overview of this ancient and now resurrected nation's history. With that out of the way, let us begin with the foundation of this great nation. The nation that would eventually form into Domnitra was originally a collection of large tribes of what were at that point fairly primitive humans, only beginning to find their own footing within the nascent realms. This would be in the times long before the Lost Years, and is debated whether it is in the Years of Elders or in the Years of Ascension. Now, these tribes found themselves under constant assault from the various wild tribes of orcs, goblins, and various other monsters that roamed the lands of Solaris. If things had continued on in this way, it is likely that the human race would have never been known, having been wiped out by these threats long before contact with the other races was made. However, that was not to be their fate. The tribes were saved, united, and elevated to become the 13 great houses of the Flame Forged. This was done with the arrival of the first emperor, Price. The emperor not only brought the tribes together, but taught and trained them in many things: art, science, magic, and greatest of all, the secrets of the erratic arts. With these, the houses and the greater humanity quickly rose to equal footing with the crafted races of elves and dwarves. So great was the rise of their star, and with such rapidity, that the Analar granted them an entire colony city to be planted within the ground and become the capital of this new empire, named the same as the nation, Domnitra. Now, in the ages prior to the Lost Years, Domnitra held dominion over nearly the entirety of the continent of Solaris. While they did not regularly exercise direct control over most of the areas, they reserved the right to do so and offered defense and protection to all within. With the creation of the Expeditus Minoris, a project of the Emperor and the wise and learned of the other younger races, a large number of the most gifted of the Flame Forged saw themselves be called to serve amongst the stars. However, with the Wars of Feather and Scale, several things changed. First, the Elders were no longer actively trusted or interacted with, as at times they were even foes. Next was the issue of the loss of the Expeditus fleet, which followed news of other antagonistic forces on the realm's seas, a new race of draconic men who would loot and destroy any vessel not fast enough to escape their own ships. An expedition to find the land of these new foes and gain reconnaissance upon them was formed, but is a matter of historical confusion, as separate records has this expedition listed as a success and others as a total loss. However, before any clarity could be made to these claims, the Analars ended the Wars of Feather and Scale by calling forth the Daemon Vanson. Now, the immediate sequence of events will never be known after the summoning, so raw is the chaos. But what is undeniable is the fact that the nation and city of Domnitra were among the first to feel the attentions of Vanson. The city of Domnitra was lost. The landscape of the continent was massively changed. Where there had been rolling grassy hills before that the city sat on and were amongst, a massive old-growth forest appeared, over hundreds of thousands of square miles that had been the core of the nation. Humanity had spread far enough at this point that they were merely left as a scattered people. And due to the stress, chaos, and conflict of the time, Domnitra, knowledge of the city and the nation, faded and was eventually lost. It was not until late in the Age of Valor that the city of Domnitra had been rediscovered, and with it, the means to reforge the royal line. As despite the existence of the God Emperor Price, his mortal line are recorded as holding the throne more than he. It should be mentioned that Emperor Price is noted to have vanished and reappeared multiple times in the history of Domnitra, sometimes hundreds or thousands of years apart. His line being left to conduct the duties required in his absence, only for his return at an important place and time, even if that important action or place he takes part in goes ununderstood for ages, and then he vanishes again. It should also be noted that Emperor Price is neither a Time Walker, a Time Lord, a Chronocrami, or any other flavor of time traveler that is known, nor does he appear to have access to the artifacts that would allow such travel. So this is a mystery that eludes explanation at this point. However, once the city had been found and the royal line was reforged, Domnitra began to reform, only to again have the royal line broken some centuries later, as there was a lack of heir to the throne, due to an unfortunate accident involving a falling tree and an overconfident heir. Now, the momentum was already going for Domnitra, so it merely held itself together and kept the throne in a state of regency until they could figure out how to proceed, as the magics of the throne room made it very clear that those of the line, of the royal line, still lived. This instigated a search across the world for possible and potential heirs, which was rendered completely moot with the most recent return of the Emperor, with whom Domnitra also recovered access and control of the Expeditus Minoris, which lined up right in time with the discovery of the other ships of the Expeditus fleet. Also returned with the Emperor were the secrets of the erratic arts, or the blue flame it is referred to most often. In the lost years, as mentioned, humanity had lost all access to the knowledge of the erratic or blue flame's existence, and the scholars of other races had misidentified the blue flame's power as just another form of normal magic, generally guessed to be psionic in nature. However, with the current reformation of Domnitra, it should be noted that they did not attempt to reclaim their entire empire, only laying claim to the immediate forest realm that the city of Domnitra found itself within in this age. Tranus and Polaron, for example, are both cities that owe their foundation and initial success to the existence and patronage of Domnitra, yet in the modern age were immediately recognized as independent of their founding sovereignty. Now it could easily be argued that this was only due to the fact that trying to force either of them to submit was a proposition that would have only ended in a worldwide conflict, thus making the declaration a formality, if nothing else. However, the might of the Flameforged, having relearned and re-teaching the arts of the blue flame, sees the race of humanity, the Flameforged in particular, standing shoulder to shoulder with all of the other, younger and crafted races, and heading into the Age of Stars with the power of the Minoris, and the Great House of Stars, one of the 13 original tribes that had been on the Minoris since its inception. Domnitra still remains an open nation, willing to work with any and all for the betterment of the realms, and of the Flame Forged in particular. Thus, they have many outreach programs for various settlements across the realms, trading goods and resources at very competitive rates to aid in the growth of settlements. These dealings see Domnitra maintain a flow of goods and coins, the like of which that is only actually matched by the grand caravans of the halflings or gnomes, or of the great corporations such as Ego. This grants them a vast amount of soft influence across the realms. And with this brief look at the history of Domnitra at its end, I want to thank each and every one of my perceptive patrons for your time and your attention as always. I would also like to assure you that we are in but the prologue of our stories with this first series, and there will be many more installments to come. I do hope that you will continue to join me as we see how the tales unfold, and the effects that they may have on the wider realms. But before we conclude our tale, by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other. Less than 2 hours later, and as my transport was starting its descent to land, Ari stood after shaking my hand on a set of terms. To be honest, I actually thought it would have been a tougher negotiation. However, it was clear that Ari, and by extension Domnitra, were far more interested in the forced projection that came with an agreement with us than what it would cost. And I am proud to say that without being exceptionally greedy, I managed to guarantee terms that would see our plans accelerated immensely. Ari looked at me with a smile. Done and done. I am happy to have had the chance to meet with you, Lord Katheon. Unfortunately, it will most likely be the last time. My duties are many, and even these few hours spent here with you are going to cost me mountains of paperwork. He laughed. The greatest mystic art of them all, able to bring entire kingdoms low and slow even the Analar. I seemed confused, and he fixed me with an even, serious stare. Would you like to know what it is, Katheon? Would you like to know the name of the power that I wield? I nodded, eager to hear what force had allowed him to pull off the tricks I had seen when he arrived on my ship. With a wide smile, he came close. Bureaumancy, young Katheon. Bureaumancy. And with a laugh, his joke told, he faded away in that same pop that had heralded his arrival. As my craft set down and I gathered my things, I prepared myself for the next stage of life. I had a long list of things that were going to need to get done, and establishing a strong base of operations set within a stronger local community gathered from those that wished to see these aims actualized was the first of those things to get done. The deal I had just struck moved things along as much as a decade faster than they should be, and I was eager to share this news with my brother and the others.